Alright guys, welcome back to the third video. That's going to be called System Types. Alright guys, so first we're going to start with the different types of cooling systems. So the first one is going to be split air conditioning. So split air conditioning, this is your typical residential cooling system. You're going to see this the most in the field. There's two parts to a split cooling system, hence the name split. The first part is almost always in the attic. And this is what we would call the air handler or the indoor unit. And it is connected to the outdoor unit via refrigerant lines. So we got the indoor unit and then we got the outdoor unit. You might have seen these on the outside of your houses. Some people call them the AC unit, some people call them the AC, some people call them condensers, compressors. So this part here, the air handler or the indoor unit, up in here you have a coil. All right, this coil gets really cold. That's how we're able to create AC. These can also be in crawl spaces underneath the house. But they're most commonly in the attics. They can also be in closets. So, if you had a little utility closet, you can also find them in there, with a coil inside. This coil up here connects to the refrigerant lines, and we've just got refrigerant running through it. Very simple. And it loops. It basically goes in a big circle. All right, we got refrigerant looping throughout all of these. Just think about it as a circle. Just goes round and around and around. We're going to call this one the air handler. And we're going to call this one the condenser. These two parts work together to create the cooling system called the split air conditioner. Next, we have a geothermal system. So this one's not very common in residential. Higher end homes, you will see it, but it's very expensive to be done, which is why you normally don't. For geothermal systems, they're normally like in a closet or below the house or something, just because they use a lot of water, and putting them in an attic wouldn't make a lot of sense. So for a geothermal system, it actually has tubes of water that run into the ground. And since the ground is naturally cooled, stays cool naturally, it loops. It actually loops, and that's how it cools the house. Very, very basic explanation, but those use water and are cooled by the earth. Next, we have chillers. So chillers are kind of like a mix of geothermal and your normal split system. So within the chilling plant, you would have basically what we just talked about, where you have refrigerant lines going back and forth between the two. In simple terms, we have warm water. We have warm water that enters basically the cooling station. That water gets cooled, and then the water gets carried inside the building, because these chilling plants are normally outside the building. And then you have a blower inside the system that's going to blow that, it's going to blow the air across that cold water, and then it's going to cool the building. This way, all the refrigerant's outside and it's not inside the building, and we can keep it separate. So that way, if any leaks happen or anything like that, people inside the building would be safe. All right, next we're going to head on to heating systems. So the main types of heating systems that we have are heat pumps, we have gas furnaces, and then we have boilers, and then we have hydronic heating systems. All right, so starting with a heat pump. So a heat pump is configured the exact same way as the normal split air conditioner. So we have an outdoor unit, and then we have an air handler. Again, they're connected with refrigerant lines, and they pass refrigerant. There's still a coil up here. It's still passing refrigerant. The only difference is there is a component in the system that allows the system to push refrigerant differently. So normally we have hot refrigerant out here, and then we have cold refrigerant up here. That's how we're able to have a cold coil in the attic, so that when the hot air in the house gets sucked up into the system, passes over that coil, and then is cold. A heat pump basically adds what's called a reversing valve that allows us to then have cold refrigerant out here, which allows us to absorb heat from the outside air. We'll talk about that later. And then we can bring that heat inside using refrigerant, and we can actually have a hot coil and turn our cold air in the home into warm air. Basically, the heat pump in heating mode allows us to heat using the same system, if that makes sense. So again, we're taking a look at a heat pump. These are electric. This uses electric as its fuel source, electricity. All right, so next we're going to take a look at a boiler, just very briefly. So boilers are typically going to be used in colder climates. 20 degrees or lower is where boilers are going to thrive. Basically, you have a little box that heats water. The boiler heats water, which then gets sent throughout the house through water lines, and then that hot water gets sent to, I'm sure everyone's seen them. If not, they're called radiators. They look a little something like this. We're going to draw two of them. So these radiators, they have little slots in between them, and the radiators get really hot. So naturally, the cold air in the room will be sitting on the bottom. This cold air will hit these radiators, and as it goes through the fins, it heats up. So then you start getting hot air to circulate around the room. As it lowers again, because cold air sinks, keeps circulating. So there's also a pump that is, it's called a circulator pump, that's pushing all the water throughout the house. So the pump is also electric, but the pump's electric, uses electricity, but obviously the flame part is gas powered. All right, now we have gas furnace for heat. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So gas furnaces are normally living in the attic. They can live, in a closet or something like that. But these guys are pretty simple. I love gas furnaces. Easy to work on, at least for me. Basically, you have some flames in your furnace. They're heating up what's called a heat exchanger. So you got flames in your furnace. They're heating up what's called a heat exchanger. Pretend that's the heat exchanger. You also have a blower inside the system that's pulling in the cold air from your house, pushing it across that hot heat exchanger, and then we get warm air coming out. To give you a visual representation about what a heat exchanger would look like, I'm going to show you. So we got flames, right? Our flames, they shoot into a tube that wraps around and then goes out of the house. So I'm sure you've seen the little exhaust pipes, right? Flames shoot into a tube. Tube gets really hot. And then we've got a blower that is pushing our cold air across the heat exchanger. The heat exchanger exchanges the heat onto that air, and then we got hot air coming out. Keep in mind, the flame gases never interact. They never touch the house air. So that's a basic explanation of a gas furnace. Next, we have a simple hydronic heating system that you will see in residential systems. So for this system, the one you see most in residential HVAC, you'll have a water heater, and there will be a loop in the water heater that is just for the HVAC heating system. Basically what happens is we have up in the attic, usually, a normal air handler, and we've got a coil in there. Basically, the hot water heater will heat up water inside this loop. There's a pump inside this system that pumps all this water. It goes throughout this coil inside and then comes out cold, and the loop restarts. Keep in mind, as this is happening, we've got a blower in here that's taking our cold air from the home, sucking it in. Once it passes that hot coil, it's coming out hot. Pretty simple. This is our water heater. We got a little flue pipe going out. Thank you guys for watching this video on heating and cooling systems. Just a basic overview of the different systems and kind of a brief explanation of how they work. I'll see you guys in the next video, where we'll be talking about the basic components